Greetings, scribes. I'm Tenesha L. founder of WriterWorks University, including sites such as getbookhelp.com and weekendpub.com, where I spend my days helping writers with everything from outlining and developmental editing to illustrations and book promotion. Since I'm also an author myself, I am going through the full book development and publication process multiple times each year for my own projects, those of my clients, and those of my students. This means I have ample experience with getting through the book writing process within a few months so that I can publish multiple times per year. I want to share some tactics with you so that you can finish your own manuscript in a timely manner. This session's focus is on how to finish a complete first draft of your book in 12 months or less. While these strategies are ones that have worked for me, my customers, and my pupils, that doesn't mean I'm making any guarantees or laying down any laws about how to write your first draft. But if you've been working on an initial draft of your manuscript for over a year, you may find these tips helpful in getting you to the end of your first draft more quickly and with less stress. This is a way, not the way. Thinking like an author. First, I want to talk about thinking like an author. Your thinking about any given activity colors everything: how fast you get through it, the quality of the end result, and how much fun you have while working on it. Approaching the act of writing a book with openness and eagerness can go a long way. But sometimes we pick up certain ideas or opinions that put us in a mindset that isn't all that helpful for writing a book. What those detrimental ideas could be is a long list. But if we pull back and get more general, we can condense the most common ones I've come across into two overarching perspectives. Along the same vein, there are two perspectives I think are really beneficial for seeing book projects through to the end. I want to make you aware of these to help you shift your attitude and approach to writing both initial and subsequent drafts of your book. I'll start with the kind of thinking that risks hurting your writing process. The first one is, I can't write like insert famous author here, so my book will suck. We all read books by people like Haruki Murakami, Tananarive Due, R.F. Kuang, Walter Mosley, and it's easy to think we can never do the things they've accomplished in the world of literature. But I think this comes from the sort of before and after photo phenomenon that's common in our culture. We often see the after picture and fawn over that, celebrate it. Sometimes we're even lucky enough to see the before picture and marvel at the difference between where someone started and where they are now. The problem comes into play because we don't see what's between the before photo and the after photo. We don't see the struggle. The same is true in the writing world. Quote unquote, suddenly, Wanda Morris has a new book out. While that's certainly wonderful, without seeing the dozens of revisions, the work of the team at her publishing company, and the efforts of her PR crew, it can easily seem like she just woke up a couple of weeks ago, tapped out a book in a few days, and then published it to the tune of thousands of sales. So when you compare your own writing, especially your first draft, with someone else's self-revised, alpha-read, professionally developmentally edited, professionally copy edited, professionally designed, beta read, and professionally proofread book, you're comparing apple seeds to apple trees, and that's completely unfair to you. These authors aren't publishing their first drafts, but they did start with a first draft, which is necessary before you can get to a final draft that goes onto the market for sale. So I see I can't write like insert famous author here, so my book will suck as harmful in two different ways. First, this thought assumes that publishing a first draft is what these famous authors are doing, and that's not the case. So that assumption is false. Second, this presumes that you can only be successful as an author if you write like someone else. That's also not true. Your biggest asset in the industry is going to be the unique writing style that you bring to each of your projects based on your literary preferences, life resources, personal perspective, and voice. Writing like someone who isn't you doesn't have to be the goal. We're working on writing and publishing your book, not theirs. No famous author ever wrote like one until they were one. They just wrote their ideas in their own way and embraced the people who liked reading those as much as they liked writing them. The second idea that can be detrimental to your writing is, I don't have time to write a manuscript. What's interesting about this idea is that if you honestly believe it, you end up being correct. But realistically, chances are you do have the time because everybody has the same 24 hours each day. What's most likely actually happening is that you are not prioritizing your writing and managing your time to intentionally make room for it. For example, Some studies have shown that the average person spends between 2 and 6 hours per day scrolling on their phone. Even using 30 minutes of that time to write would still leave you with plenty of scrolling time each day. But if you don't make a conscious effort to use 30 of those minutes for writing, it won't happen. There are multiple ways in which you can treat your writing with the respect it deserves, regardless of what's going on in your life. As in the example about scrolling, you can reduce how much time you spend doing other things without eliminating them from your routine completely. Watch one less episode of that anime you're working your way through. Game for 1 hour instead of two on the weekends. Stop saying so late at work. Consider things you do in your life for 30 minutes or more each day. Which of those could you cut down on to give yourself some dedicated daily writing time? Another option is to eliminate some things from your life completely, especially if they are harmful or unpleasant. For example, if you aren't an extrovert, going to happy hour every Friday night with coworkers may have been a routine you've gotten swept up into, but really rather wouldn't do since it leaves you so drained at the end of the night and creates a bunch of awkward social encounters that make you spend your weekends cringing at your questions, responses, or behaviors. Telling these people you've got to get home to work on a project means you can go home and write during the time you normally would have been hanging out with them. Eliminating tasks that are not your responsibility is important as well. For example, if you're regularly driving someone to work who is capable of using public transportation, that's another chunk of time you could get back in your schedule by no longer performing that service for them. The same goes for things like cooking meals for those capable of doing it themselves. Consider what tasks you have gotten into the habit of doing that aren't actually your responsibility. Taking even one of those off your plate could be what provides you with a ready made time slot in your schedule that you can dedicate to writing. The fact that you have made the time to watch this video, for example, shows that you do have some level of control over how you spend your time. All you need to do now is make sure that you consistently wield that power for the benefit of your authorship. Now, on the flip side of these detrimental ideas are a couple of beneficial ones. As you push those toxic thoughts out of your head, feel free to replace them with these two. First, my manuscript is a priority, not just something I want to do, not just important, but a true priority, meaning that there are going to be things that get pushed aside in order to make time for your writing because it takes center stage in that context. If you have established and shared with your family and friends that you will be spending each Saturday from 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. writing in the dining area at your local grocery store, them deciding to have an event at noon on a Saturday may signal that they don't want you to be there or that they don't mind if you come late. I once had an audience member in one of my lectures ask how to get other people to respect their writing time. My answer was that it really helps to make sure you set the example by respecting it first. In this example, that means either skipping the event or arriving after your writing session. But if you push your writing session aside to attend the event, that shows that you'll likely ignore your writing time for other reasons as well, and sends the message that it's not really all that important to you. Believe that your writing is a priority and then behave accordingly. Put your writing on par with other important things you do, such as going to work, showering, or eating meals. The second beneficial thought I want to highlight is no draft is ever perfect. Even the final draft of your manuscript is going to have stuff in it that you and your editorial team missed. Character inconsistencies, confusing phrasing, missing words, plot holes, missing page numbers, blurry images, and so on. So, expecting your first draft to look like what goes on the shelf just puts undue, unrealistic pressure on you. Remember that you're going to gather an editorial team that includes alpha readers, developmental and copy editors, beta readers, and similar folks. They are all going to help you enhance the manuscript prior to publication so you don't have to try to quote unquote eat the elephant all in one bite, so to speak. And you definitely don't have to do it alone. Believe that you're a human being and that none of your work is going to be completely flawless because there simply is no such thing. I've been reading books for nearly 4 decades, and not one time have I come across a manuscript that didn't have some vulnerability or another. But I still thoroughly enjoyed those books, and your audience will enjoy yours as well. Consider putting together a puzzle. If I hand you a puzzle as a gift, what's the first thing you'll do when you're ready to start solving it? Now, whenever I ask this question in front of an audience, I'll usually get answers like find the corner pieces or flip the pieces face up. Now, both of those things, you would do soon after opening the box for sure. But the actual first thing most people do isn't those because The first thing you do is dump the puzzle pieces out of the box and onto your work surface. Then you can start turning them face up and looking for corner pieces or edge pieces or whatever else your strategy entails. But getting the pieces out of the box is the actual very first step. So think of writing your first draft like that. You're dumping the puzzle pieces out so you can have something to work with. And dumping your puzzle pieces out of the box is not the same as having a finished puzzle put together. So don't compare the two as if they are the same, and you save yourself a lot of stress. A first draft is a first step in a longer process of book development. If you can understand and accept that, the mental strain of writing a book can be lessened dramatically. Recap. Writing a book is as much a psychological endeavor as a physical one. Believing that your book will be quote unquote bad because it won't be like another author's isn't helpful since it's not supposed to be. Your book is yours, not theirs. No famous author wrote like one until they were one. They just wrote like themselves until they became famous. Seeing yourself as not having the time to write a book isn't helpful because the first step toward being intentional and making that time in your schedule is acknowledging that you have the same 24 hours each day as anybody else does. You have the time to write, you just aren't using any of that time that you have to write. Seeing your manuscript as a priority, just like showering, eating, or going to work, is what is going to get you to the end of writing that first draft. Even if other people don't respect your writing time, as long as you do, you can still meet your writing goals. Understanding that first drafts are first steps in a longer process makes your expectations more realistic and your writing journey less stressful. Time inventory. As I've just covered, we all have 24 hours in a day, but it's up to us to figure out how we want to use that time. Every full time author that I know of or have ever met builds their career on writing. That means they can't sit around waiting to quote unquote get time from the universe to write. They control their own schedules, therefore, they make the time to write. I encourage you to exercise that power as well. One way to do that, if you're uncertain about solid times to write, is to create a time inventory. This just means creating a vague schedule of your typical week and then pinpointing the best times for you to write. But remember that this isn't just about when you have time free, it's about which times would be most productive for you to write. For example, I'm an introvert, a homebody, and a night owl. Yes, I may have times earlier in the day when I could be writing, but if I'm outside of my house or it's early in the morning, I'm not going to be anywhere near as productive with my writing as I would be late at night, snuggled up in my pajamas in my home office. So it's important to not only figure out where the gaps are in your schedule or where you could either eliminate or shorten certain activities, but it's helpful to find the times of day that are most productive for you. Some people like being up early in the morning and would get up at around 5 a.m. even if they didn't have to get up to go to work. So this person could lean into that and wake up at 5 and use some of that morning time before they have to leave for work to write. Other people may have the best opportunity for writing in the middle of their workday, such as during their designated lunchtime, so they can eat and write. For still other people, doing a little bit of writing each day might not be as effective for the way their brain works, so they might benefit more from a longer weekly session than they would from shorter daily sessions. These are the sorts of things that's helpful to consider to make sure you set up a writing schedule that is going to be as comfortable as possible for you so that you can take full advantage of each writing session. Making a time inventory just means creating a general schedule for what your average week looks like. We'll do one for Nettie and another for Rand. Nettie does not own a laptop and is most energetic right after waking up in the morning. Nettie's schedule looks like it's got a few gaps where she could write, so we simply highlight those first. Now, of those, which ones are going to be most productive for her? Take into consideration that she does not own a laptop and is a morning person. This would lead me to cross out any free time she has away from home and any time after she gets home from work. If Nettie has decided she wants to work in 30 minutes of writing at least 3 times each week, here are the places where I would recommend she do that. Now, let's look at Rand's schedule. Rand does own a laptop, does his best work in the middle of the day, and is a messy eater. He's got what seems like a pretty jammed schedule, but there are still a few places where time can be reserved for writing. Now, let's take into consideration that he's a messy eater and might spill something on his laptop or paper notebook, meaning we should probably leave off build time options. Once that's done, we can remove any options that are early in the morning or late at night. This leaves us with a couple of ideal times for Rand to write, especially if he shaves some time off of his other activities to broaden those gaps. I encourage you to do the same with your own schedule. If you think you are someone who has complained about not having time to write, Write down what your general schedule looks like. When are you working, commuting, eating, gardening, gaming, etc.? Then look for all the feasible gaps. After you find those, look for the gaps you think would work best for you to use on a consistent basis for writing. These are the times you'll put on your digital and physical calendars and share with people like your housemates, friends, or family to make sure they don't disturb you or schedule things they want you to attend during these times if at all possible. Creating writing times that are comfortable for you is critical because the more comfortable it is for you to write, the more likely you are to do it consistently and the higher the chances of you achieving the kind of literary success you're seeking. Recap. Everyone has time to write, they just aren't spending the time they have on writing. Create a time inventory to help you assess where you can do your writing throughout any given day or week. Of those possibilities, select times that will work best for you to spend on writing. It's okay to write a little bit each day or in larger chunks once or twice each week. Do whatever works best for your preferences. The more comfortable you can make the writing process for yourself, the more likely you are to do it consistently. Just writing. One of the biggest obstacles that newbie writers face as they begin their authorship journey is with learning how to just write. Instead of doing this, they want to write and revise, write and analyze dialogue, write and research punctuation, write and construct a plot, and so on. Often, when I see that someone has taken longer than a year to write a book, this is a major part of why. Not because of slower typing speed or because they've been stranded on a desert island without writing tools or because the book they were writing was ridiculously complex, but simply because they couldn't wrap their head around the idea of just writing when it came time to write. But if you can master this deceptively easy concept, you'll be at a huge advantage compared to your peers. If you've been following me or my company, you know that I have lessons all over about how to outline a book. This is one of the main reasons I recommend doing that, so that when you get to the point of starting your first draft, you can just focus on writing that draft because you've already thought through what you want to include in it. I encourage doing self revisions and hiring professionals to help you groom your manuscript later because, again, it allows you to focus on just the writing when it comes time to create your first draft. Here's an example of what I mean. I'm going to just write for 10 seconds. This is a cyberpunk web series that I've been writing as a challenge for myself, so it provides a great opportunity to see how I use a pared down version of my normal outline to write each of these episodes. If you've been following along, I'll apologize for any spoilers now. Notice the misspelled words, missing words, clunky phrasing, etc. Now, notice that I didn't waste time fixing any of that right this second. I just wrote. Recap. Just writing means allowing yourself to get your outline prompts fleshed out. It doesn't mean criticizing yourself, nitpicking your lines, or making changes while you're supposed to be putting words on the page. Write with the confidence that comes from understanding that this is the beginning, not the end all be all. Whatever you put down can be transformed later by cutting, adding, or rearranging things. It just needs to exist first. When you're in the writing phase, do what you can to ease the burden of producing that first draft. Outlining beforehand and saving revisions for after the draft is finished are part of that effort. Writing math. At this point, you're pretty much ready to start writing, but it can help to have an idea of what your goals are for each writing session. When you have something to work toward and a way to track your progress, you may find that you are more energized and motivated to do the work each time you have a writing session. In general, there are two common ways I see used most often to track writing progress: by word count or by beat. With word count tracking, you're going to select an overall word count goal and write until you hit it. To help break that overall feat up, you create smaller targets for each of your sessions. For example, let's say you want a 100,000 word romance novel draft finished in 6 months, with you writing for 1 hour twice each week. The math would be 6 months times 4 weeks for a total of 24 weeks. You write twice each week for a total of 48 sessions or 48 hours of writing time, since each session is an hour long. Then you divide those 100,000 words across those 48 hours, and you get 2,084 words per session. As a side note, if you decide to use this method, I suggest that you always round up when you get a decimal of any kind. So 110.2 words becomes 111. 3,999.4 words becomes 4,000 words. This only helps you finish your draft faster. With this math in hand, you know that each time you sit down to a session, your goal is to hit 2,084 words. Word count tracking can be helpful for closely monitoring the progress on your piece. This is especially true if you're going to be sharing your writing progress with your audience as you work. A couple of things to be mindful of when using word count tracking are underwriting and overwriting. By underwriting, I mean stopping short of what a scene or section needs to feel fully fleshed out because you're approaching your session goal. In our example, if you have a scene that's really a 3,000 word scene, but you are currently at 2,000 words for the session, you might try to wrap the scene up soon so that you don't go much farther than your 2,084 word goal for the session. This isn't something most writers consciously do, mind you, but when they go back to do self revisions, they'll find that there are multiple places within the book where a scene feels too fast or coverage of a concept seems overly superficial. If you notice this during self revisions, just remember that this is likely what happened, and you only need to let the writing breathe a bit in order to remedy the issue. Now, let's say everything in the previous example is the same, except you're writing a self help book. You could have a segment of the book that covers a concept that would only take you about 1,500 words to adequately explain. But you've got another 584 words you need in order to meet the same session goal of 2,084 words. So you just keep your momentum and continue writing about this simple concept for another 584 words until you meet your session goal. Unfortunately, that means you've likely written a few hundred words of fluff, tangents, or redundancies into your piece because you finished fully explaining the idea more than 2 pages ago. If you realize that this seems to have happened during your self revisions, simply cut out the extraneous pieces. When you realize you might be falling into this trap while writing, just remember that you can simply move on to the next item in your outline. You don't have to make each session goal cover only a single concept or only a single scene. Some sessions, your goal could cover 3 or 4 different beats, while other times you'll need the full word count goal for that session in order to write out the scene or section you're working on. This sort of fluctuation is common and it's okay to relax and do what feels right in the moment. Remember, you'll go back and refine things on your own with volunteers and with professionals later on. Now, beat by beat writing is another method you can use. I found it helpful for many first time writers because they often feel a lot less stress and pressure related to cranking out X number of words per day. Instead, the focus is on the completeness of what they are supposed to write. So, generally, I recommend that writers do this by making goals related to their outlines instead of their word count. That way, regardless of how many words you end up writing, your focus is on a full scene or section as noted in your outline. For example, let's say you have a 27-point outline for a self help book that you want to finish by the end of the month by writing 1 beat per day. That math means you'll shoot for writing approximately one of your outline beats per day. Again, because you're focused on what you're writing, not the number of words, you could spend an hour writing or 15 minutes writing. It would all depend on what the beat needs. If you start on the first of the month, you could be done by the 27th of the month if you stick to writing 1 beat each day. Using this method can also greatly reduce or even eliminate the possibility of overwriting and having a bunch of content you need to cut during self revisions, or underwriting and creating a bunch of sessions that need additional text. Recap: no matter how many words you're trying to write, you can break that number up into more manageable chunks. If racing to a word count each session is overwhelming for you, consider using your outline for beat by beat writing instead. This allows you to make continuous, measurable progress on your manuscript, but provides more relaxed conditions under which you can write. Beat by beat writing can also help you avoid overwriting or underwriting, which saves you time and headache during the revision and editing phases of the book development process. Staying the course. As important as it is to understand how to get the writing of your manuscript done, it's also helpful to understand what to do when things go off the rails, as can happen. Here are 2 common obstacles I see pop up for writers that can often easily either be completely avoided or can be quickly recovered from. First is missing a writing session. This is likely going to happen, especially right after you set up a schedule for yourself and you're transitioning to having this new event on your calendar. But there are 2 methods that can help keep you from missing writing sessions. One is to clear your digital and physical calendars during your writing time. So this means blocking your scheduled writing time off as if it were any other important appointment, keeping yourself and others from scheduling anything else during that time. For a bit of extra safety, consider blocking off the 15 minutes before and after the session as well. That way, you have time to transition from one activity to the next in a low stress way that doesn't leave you breathless once you sit down to write or rushing to get up and leave so you can get to your next calendar event or task. A second option for preventing missed sessions is to share your writing schedule with friends and family. When they know that you're supposed to be writing at a certain time, they can avoid asking you to do other things during that time and hold you accountable if you're not writing in those moments. Sometimes a little external support can go a long way. Now, whenever you've already missed a writing session, there are three options you can consider for remedying that issue. First, you could add a makeup session to your schedule. For instance, if you normally write on Tuesdays and Saturdays, but you miss your Tuesday session, maybe making up that session on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday would be an option to help you get caught up. Second, you could add the backlog to your next session. So, for instance, if you were supposed to write 2 beats per session and you missed one, maybe you could write 4 beats in a single session in order to get back on track. Third, you could spread the problem across multiple sessions. So, if you were supposed to write 200 words per day and you miss a day, consider writing an extra 50 words per day for the next 4 days. Lastly, you could adjust your completion date. This may come as a surprise, but you are in control of your writing schedule. So, if you were on track to finish your first draft by December 31st of 2026, and that now needs to be pushed back to January 7th, 2027, well, just push it back. If something happens that means you need a little extra time, take it. You're in control and you're allowed to be compassionate towards yourself. The second big thing that I see people run into is feeling stuck or what some newbies will call writer's block, right? So you're writing and you feel as if you don't know what comes next, essentially. In order to prevent this from happening, I got three suggestions. One is you can prevent feeling stuck by outlining before you start writing. This allows you to have a clear path for what comes next, allowing you to always be writing toward the next scene or next section until you get to the end. About 99% of the time that a student or client comes to me saying that they're stuck, it's literally just because they started writing with no plan. And once we make one, they get back on track and they're off and running. A second option is to make sure you're not going into the writing process trying to both edit and create the content at the same time. Just write, and it's a lot more difficult to end up feeling stuck. You're going to edit later anyway, so you don't have to do it now, especially since that only slows you down. Third option, be open minded. Often people feel quote unquote stuck because the ideas that come to mind don't match their often impossible to meet criteria for what constitutes a quote unquote good idea. So I repeat, you can change every bit of this manuscript later if you choose to do so, but you don't have to have a first draft that you think is ready to publish. It just needs to exist so that you have something to work with. Some people have gone as far as to completely scrap thousands or even tens of thousands of words of work because they didn't think it was quote unquote good enough, even though they hadn't given the manuscript a chance to develop into a stronger piece. An analogy I like to use for this is getting a puppy. If the puppy is 2 months old, it's going to have both liquid and solid accidents in your house. It's going to chew on things you don't want it to. It's going to track dirt in the house and so on and so forth. Now, does that make the puppy an inherently bad puppy? Of course not. It simply hasn't been given the time and training it needs to become a well behaved dog. But if you take the puppy back to the shelter claiming it's somehow defective and continue to do this with every puppy you bring home, you're never going to get the chance to train a puppy into adulthood. Instead, what most pet owners do, and what I recommend you do for your book idea essentially, is give the puppy the time it needs to learn what you want it to do in given situations. When you need to potty, whine at me and I'll let you out. When you're hungry, nudge my knee and then sit quietly until I finish my current task and I will get up to feed you. This is how a rambunctious puppy develops into a well behaved dog. But you have to put the time and effort in, not throw the fur ball out the second it does something you don't like. So it goes with your manuscript. Give the ideas you have a chance to show you what they can do. Let your critique group and editorial professionals help you whip the manuscript into shape. And doing all that starts with accepting and embracing the ideas that come to you without judgment. Let the billion-dollar romance industry help you relax about this a bit. Pretty much every single romance piece can be boiled down to someone meets someone else and overcomes some stuff to fall in love. That's it. That exact same idea has made authors millionaires time and time again. In some niches, any deviation from this concept can have audiences foaming at the mouth in anger. They want only the slightest variation on that idea, and inserting anything too new, fresh, or outside the box means they'll stop reading your stuff. So that means you don't need to have ideas that the world has just never seen before, again, if that's even possible, as long as us humans have been telling stories, in order to have readers love, purchase, and share your work. So if you go into the writing stage being open to whatever comes to you, you're much less likely to ever feel stuck, even if you don't use an outline. If you do end up feeling stuck, here are some treatment options. First, go back to your outline. On occasion, a student or client will get on a roll, so to speak, and start writing each session, essentially forgetting that they even created an outline. Then, when they don't know what's supposed to come next, they get stuck and they feel lost, forgetting that they have a GPS route to help them get back on track. If you've created an outline, check back in with it to see where you may have gone a bit too far off course, thereby creating a loss of direction that can leave you feeling stuck. Second, you can review your premise. Again, if you have prepared a premise, taking a look at it can be a helpful grounding activity to get your writing back on course. If you need help creating a premise, just head to weekendpub.com and review those free lessons to get started. Third, you can write out possibilities since you can just delete the ones you don't want to use once you start your self revisions. For example, if you're struggling with how to end the book, write out a full happy ending, cliffhanger ending, and tragic ending. During self revisions, you can consider which of those you like best or even combine elements of each in order to close out the piece. A fourth option is to consume the kind of piece you are writing. So, if you're in the middle of writing a dark interracial romance set in downtown Atlanta, try reading similar work. These don't have to be direct comps, of course, but having multiple elements that match your project is helpful. For instance, a dark interracial romance that may be set in a different city, or an Atlanta based interracial romance that's cozy, and so on. Consuming similar material can mean reading or listening to a book, watching a film, or reading a webcomic. So don't limit yourself to just books if you're having trouble finding content similar to your own. So, in summary, writing a book in 12 months or sooner takes mental flexibility, self love, a little math, and a lot of consistency. You can make writing your book this year more doable by using readily available tools and strategies such as digital and physical calendars, book premises, and outlines. If you want the people around you to respect your writing time, set that standard by respecting your writing time yourself. For newer writers who may tend to get overwhelmed or discouraged more easily, consider tracking your writing progress using beat by beat writing instead of tracking by word count. Do what you can to make each writing session as comfortable as possible. The more comfortable the process is for you, the more likely you are to do it consistently, and the more likely you are to successfully finish your draft in a year or less. Thanks so much for watching, scribes. If you have questions or need help with anything covered in this video, please don't hesitate to reach out to me as soon as you can. Happy drafting!